Good afternoon from Kenya. How's everyone doing? Thanks to the participants for logging in and to the organizers of this wonderful conference and to the previous panelists. I have listened keenly and I am all the more enriched from the words of wisdom and discussion so far. I am Melba. I work at Base Titanium here in Kenya. Base Titanium is a subsidiary of Energy Fuels that is based in the United States. And my given topic is women as professionals in mining, challenges and strategies for success, which I think segues quite nicely from the previous presentation. And so without much further ado, allow me to jump in. Next slide. So basically, this presentation will take you through just in general, what are some of the challenges we are facing as women in mining? What are some of the structural barriers that are there? How do we reframe the narrative? And I will then share some of my personal thoughts and guidance towards especially young female professionals. Next slide. Okay, so this is where I guess I do my introduction. I have a career as a woman in mining that spans academia, spans civil society, a short stint in government, and more recently in the last close to a decade now in the mining, direct in the mining sector, where I have worked in external affairs at Base Titanium, and more recently holding the fort as general manager of external affairs. And it's been a rather interesting journey having to work across a variety of stakeholders, both from the technical stuff that we've had but also from the more social, environmental aspects of mining is what I basically touch on. And it's been a tremendous journey. In fact, when I did my doctorate way back when in Australia, the dream then, I did my doctorate in extractives and human rights. I thought I was coming back to the continent, strapping on my boots, putting on my shorts, and we are going to the Congo, and we are going to go and, let's sort human rights. Very passionate. It's always been a passion of mine, human rights, all the way from when I was a small girl. And on that year when we came back to Kenya, oil had just been struck in the country and mining was ramping up. So I decided to pack my shorts and those dreams and work within the Kenyan context. Next. So how do we understand some of these challenges faced by women? If we just go by numbers alone, always a good place to start because it gives you an idea of what we are facing. We're a very small fraction in the workforce, anywhere between 8 and 15% are the typical numbers that are being thrown around. You'll see that in Australia, it's 16% of the mining workforce are women, USA only 14%, Canada 15%, South Africa 12%, and Sub-Saharan Africa, when we count in the ASM factor, then we are looking at 30 to 50% of the workforce being women. Part of the questions that we ask is, does it matter? And my answer is yes, it absolutely does. Because guess what? When we are sending our children, both boys and girls, to school to go and learn, I don't know about others, but I'm pretty sure that we are telling them, be the best that you can be. And it is incumbent upon us, those who found others already breaking glass ceilings, that we continue to the best that we can to expand this number so that the daughters that are being born and being told get into STEM also find an opportunity for them. And that they are going to be welcome, they are going to be safe in this mining sector, and that they're competent and that they can perform and that they can excel. And so that's why we look at the numbers, because globally, our gender numbers are sort of on a par, but then you come to mining, a drop. And so we always start with the numbers. Next. The other thing that we like to point out is now we disaggregate the data a little bit. Over and above, is it male and female working? It's also what kind of jobs do they have? So in mining companies, you will find a lot of women in mostly administrative roles, HR, IT, external affairs, and the like. And very few actually end up going to the more technical roles. And just by how the industry is constituted, folks that have more technical roles tend to get paid higher. So what does that mean in real time? It means that we start seeing a gender pay gap. Okay. And so that is why we're encouraging a lot of young women to really take on these courses in STEM and sign up for engineering roles, for geological jobs, for more technical jobs in the mining industry. And we then hope that we'll begin seeing that this gender pay gap is reducing. Next. Why are we facing some of these issues? I'm sure this has been talked about in some shape or form, but so I will not get into too much detail. But number one is when we look at structural barriers, outdated perceptions. I remember first starting out one of the mining areas that I went to, and that was back in 2013. And the ladies there, when I asked them, why aren't you mining out there? There's gemstones, it's such a rich area, and the opportunity was so big. And their response was, how can I mine? Go back home all dirty. And my husband also comes home at the same time. What kind of woman would I be? And this was a serious conversation. Fast forward 10 years later, we thank God for the Constitution, which has really opened up spaces for women. Oh, these women are now part and parcel together with the men and mining. So their policy changes made a difference into how women regard themselves. But also, we are seeing more and more women really just saying, listen, it's about myself, it's about growth, it's about my family. And some of these more traditional norms that they're being, women are supposed to be just kept and clean and all of that, they're challenging them and they're seeing the fruits. Another issue that I've come across is there's very limited mentorship and professional support. In my cohort of, I'm trying to avoid the word age group, of professionals, it is incredibly difficult to find mentors, not so much that they're not available, but the ones that are available, both male and female, you almost feel that they're so overwhelmed by so many requests. And as a fellow professional, you want to be empathetic as well. And while, you'll go for mentorship opportunities, you do realize that it's such a small crowd to access this mentorship support. And so we found that this limited access to mentorship, to sponsorship, can really regress a woman's professional growth. And it's something that I know as women we have talked about, and we must carry each other and all of that. But the truth of the matter is, I think a lot of us, at the end of the day, we know there are some famous names we know out there. We know Sheila Kama, we know Zenzi, we know, and a few, of course, some of the panelists here, we know them. But they can't serve everybody as much as they mean well. So I've always wanted to challenge us as women at whatever level that you're in. It doesn't matter whether you're a household name or not. Mentor where you can, who you can, at whatever level. Is the only way we all get up. But that's a serious challenge. Another challenge is on occupational health and safety concerns. This is it's something that we cannot wish away, and it's not just a question of large-scale mining. It's across, including artisanal and small-scale mining. Women go through a lot of physical challenges. It is a very deep and painful subject for women to talk about who've gone through the untolds. And so it's something that I feel detracts especially younger women from coming in, because the stories that we have had are harrowing. And more we are seeing more mining companies reporting on what's happening. I think Rio Tinto came out with a report about 2-3 years ago, which sent shockwaves across the mining sector. And since then, we are seeing more and more companies looking at these gender-specific risks and how to address them within their companies. And finally, this barrier I feel very particular about, work-life balance and family responsibilities. When you come in, I think one of the other presenters was talking about how you're told to get a thick skin and this is how the workplace must be. You cannot show your emotions. If you need to work 14 hours a day, you do that. And that's well and good. I think for the most part, as long as that has been made very clear, that was very transparent from the word go and you signed up to it, well and good. It doesn't mean, though, that there are no consequences there to be suffered, especially if you look at the gender perspective. It means that something has got to give. It means that family time has got to be compromised. It means that sometimes, because you're the primary caregiver as a woman, and I'm not saying it's all the cases, sometimes you have men being primary caregivers, but I'm just talking about generally. You have to step away and attend that baseball game or soccer game and still come back and do what you need to do. And I think here we have, especially young women who these days are talking about YOLO. You live only once. And, they are, especially Gen Z, are really all about, I'm claiming my space and my mental health. I think this is a conversation that the mining sector needs to have so that we incorporate the next generation of young women. Next. So the way I like to look at this is, rather than look at it through the challenges, those are important. I want to look at this as, let's reframe the narrative. As we are talking about gender, we can always look at this from the negative perspective. And yes, sometimes it is warranted. But perhaps in order to get more and more partners in this journey of getting those numbers up, in this journey of making sure that our sisters get the quality jobs, let's reframe the narrative. Let's talk about why it is absolutely critical that women are part and parcel of the team going forward. Why recruiters and departments in HR should be, giving justifications as to why a certain person was picked and not the other person. And all of this really, for me, when I look at it, is we're reframing the narrative to fit merit, but that merit needs to also be gender sensitive. Otherwise, we will only have a narrative that will be gender blind. So let's reframe the narrative that looks at, from an economic standpoint, this is the value add that women have got to give. In my team, community engagement, the reflections and perspectives of women when they're out from the field back into the work that I then put together and fill into from a policy perspective is absolutely invaluable. Okay. Yes, the male members also have their viewpoints, but I always note the difference and the kind of the kind of things that they are more aware of, that they know this would potentially be an even bigger issue if it's not addressed now, as opposed to a month from now. I found that having a gender balanced team has really put up the levels of reduction, and that's just one of the many benefits. Next. So how have we done things at Base Titanium? I need to do a shameless plug here. We are now Energy Fuels, and this is our agenda story. We are blessed because from the very beginning, we had very intentional leadership about women. They were not shy about it. The question came to, how do we get them in? Because the women that were taking the STEM courses were very few and far in between. But our managers, our general managers, all the way to corporate level, everybody was very intentional about, let's work with as many women as possible. And those efforts have paid off over the years. We, at some point, were at 31%. In terms of the gender composition. If you look at global statistics, they're hovering at 10% or so, or less than 15%, as I've told you. Our graduate trainees that come in, at least 25% were women. We used to hover at 5%, and this grew. Our community development officers, 30% of them, and leading major infrastructure projects that benefit community. We have women managers, also over 30%, leading the geology departments, HR, IT, external affairs. We are getting teams that are led by women, and we are seeing the benefits for it. Next slide. That was the internal story at Base. I'm trying to keep it short. There's a lot more I could say. And so find me off camera for further explanations. Nationally, we truly believe it's our responsibility to walk the journey with national level stakeholders at the same time. We are especially intertwined with the Association of Women in Extractives in Kenya, who have been able to implement a variety of programs in financial literacy, health and safety, GBV, and the like. So these are one way in which we participate at the national level. Next. At the community level, through our scholarship programs, nearly half of the recipients are female. We work with women entrepreneurs, and just recently actually concluded a 1,100 women training program on entrepreneurship at the community level, and it's been great. Next. I'm concluding. What have I found to be strategies at work? I wanted to take this more from a personal perspective than from a purely corporate, because we've had quite a bit already on that. I think one of the best strategies I found is that you need to find allies. You need to find allies wherever you are. They can be men, they can be women. I know from recent research that we conducted on gender matters, on how it feels to be a woman at base, that a significant proportion of the women say that if it was not for a fellow woman who was seen to be very empathetic towards others, saying, "Don't give up, be strong," they would have dropped out, because they just could not cope or integrate. And so find yourself an ally, I think, is very important. I myself, I have an accountability partner in this professional growth, and it has really been good to have a mirror whom you can bounce off ideas, but also conversations are confidential. Secondly, collaborate beyond the mind. Join a WIM association, such as this one. Join AWIC, join AWIMA. All these are women who are already, incredibly linked up across the globe and within certain countries. And joining those associations, for me, I found would provide a lot of young women with networking opportunities and mentorship opportunities. Thirdly, upskill, reskill as may be needed. In Kenya, if I may say, one of the things that I noticed that is needed, I don't know if there's young women in the forum, but especially for technical women, when we go out for stakeholder engagements, you can find a lot of folks such as myself with law degrees and with business degrees and the like, but women with technical backgrounds who are able to then transcribe that technicality into layman's language. There is such a need for you, okay? Both working with government, with policymakers, within companies. That is such a skill set that I think should be grown. And so, upskill, reskill as may be needed. And don't shy away from any technological advancements, because that's where the world is going. Be adaptable. I call this, just be ready to pivot. Sometimes part of what holds us back as women is, I went and I got a 4-year degree in geology, and this is what my parents paid for. And you stick there, and yet the opportunities are calling from a different perspective. So I always talk to young people and tell them, that may be well and good, and that season might come. But for now, if this is the low-hanging fruit, please grab it with both hands. And as long as you excel, you give it your all these things eventually will work for you good. And finally, I've spoken this about before, mostly because I tend to mentor a lot of young women on work-life balance. Really be intentional about your boundaries. I remember when I had my first baby, I used to show up with her for all meetings in the crib, and not pick up calls after 2 p.m. But I was also up at 2 a.m. every single day to work. But I was very, very intentional about access and when we could work, when I was available on emails and all of that. And that helped me a lot with work-life balance. Story for another day. Next. And that's it. So I look at all these gender matters for women in the professional space, that we are moving slowly and surely from, getting critical masses of people from participation to decision-making spots, so that when you're sitting in that seat, you are able to make really impactful decisions that benefit both men and women. and you keep on punching that glass ceiling at your level and for as far as you can, because we are all beneficiaries of women who did the most before us. Thank you.